If you want it to be translated into Montenegrin, you can shift to channel 3, which, if you don't speak English, you wouldn't understand, but I've said it anyway. In any case, I'm going to jump right into the questions. President, former President, what is the proper way of referring to you now?
Kao što ste se i obratili.
You told former president.
Well, I'm going to stick with Mr. President. I think that's the safest way in the Balkans. I'd like to maybe start with your new life. You've been out of office for about a month now. How is retirement treating you so far?
Well, I'm just adapting to the new reality. But I have to tell you that I'm very happy with my new regime of life. I think everybody can find it understandable because I was for 30 years in the most responsible positions in the state. So now I really feel relaxed, because the heavy burden of responsibility for development of that country is now given to other people who got legitimacy in recently held elections.
I mean, as you say, you have a perspective unmatched in the region, over 30 years, in fact, as both Prime Minister and President. I think you might be one of the few people who's been to this forum more often than myself, and I've had the pleasure of speaking to you here many times. But I wonder, given the state of the region, and you leave office, you've left office at a time of real fragility in the region. We had the incident in Kosovo yesterday, the attack on the KFOR soldiers. How do you see that development? How do you see that situation in northern Kosovo developing in the coming days and weeks?
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you. Stability of the region is very fragile and very unreliable. We know that it's the region which has the reputation of being very unstable, and then it's understandable that we have defined the formula to secure more stable security for the region. I mean, I kept insisting that there is an equality sign between stability of the region and European integration. And I claimed all the time that the history, recent and old history, teaches us that our region does not have reliable self-regulatory mechanisms for stability, and that stability and prosperity can happen for the region through the process of integration. Well, when it comes to integration, I want to say that it's been 2 years since the summit in Thessaloniki, summit of the European Union, when they reinforced our belief that we will have European future, in foreseeable future. And I participated in Thessaloniki summit. And there was Euro enthusiasm at the time. The Prime Minister of Greece proposed at that time to define that 2014 should be the year or anniversary of the First World War, that it should be the year when all the countries of the Western Balkans will be members of the European Union. So, we are now a couple of years later, aren't we? So the question might be now, is our region closer to the European Union or further from the European Union than in 2003? And I would say that it's the latter. And I will stop there, and I just give you an inspiration for continuation of our conversation if you are interested in that. But let me just mention Kosovo briefly because you mentioned it. I think that the situation in the region of Kosovo is just illustrated by the destiny of this panel. You know, this panel was envisaged to have 4 participants and 3 gave up, and you got only me now. And I think that the other 3 gave up dominantly because of the problems that happened yesterday in the north of Kosovo. And why am I mentioning this? Well, because this illustration confirms very much that in the Western Balkans, we still live in such a way that we don't know what the day might bring. And then it leads us to another question, the question, why is it so? Why do we live like that? And I believe that through this panel, we will actually tackle some aspects that are important for this topic. But I would give the key diagnosis in one sentence, then we can elaborate it. There is no doubt that all of us who live in the Western Balkans are responsible for the situation, but I believe that the key responsibility for the current situation in our region is in the policy of the international community towards the Western Balkans in the time behind us. And now I will stop and give you the opportunity to ask the things that you consider might be interesting.
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting perspective because I think it's one that a lot of people in the room might disagree with. Although they might agree with you that the region is further away today from membership than it was in 2003. We had a poll in a session this morning showing that the audience believed that the region wouldn't join the EU before 2040. Which is a pretty long way out. There were 3 choices, and I think about 60% said 2040 versus 2030. But I think many people would also point to your country and to you specifically in the context of Montenegro's path towards Europe and say that you also could have done more to put your country on more stable European footing. What do you say to those critics, and what regrets do you have now that you have the possibility to look back? You're unencumbered by office. What are your regrets?
As I told you, there is no dilemma that a large part of the responsibility for the situation in the region is ours, of us who live in the region and particularly leaders. But we have to go back to the old dilemma, who is older, chicken or the egg. I think that the poor or bad initial impulse for this complication in the region was actually the hesitation of the European Union to continue enlargement policy and hesitation of the European Union to finish the process of uniting Europe. You will remember that there was the thesis of enlargement fatigue. That's what we had on the scene. And then, after it died out, we had the opinion that nothing is going on in the process of enlargement. Since that summit in 2003, it's only Croatia that became a member of the European Union. Other countries, more or less, are on the positions similarly away from the European Union as they used to be in 2003. So I think that the European Union, by being inactive, by being passive, and with their attitudes, I mean, you remember one of the first statements of Jean-Claude Juncker when he took the office in the European Commission. He said that there will be no enlargement during his term of office. That actually inspired lack of trust in Western Balkans into the idea that we will really become members of the European Union. And then logical consequence was slowing down of the reform process. And European officials are right when they say that there are no reforms in the Western Balkans today. That is correct. However, we have to add one sentence that they should think about their responsibility for the hesitation or lack of efforts of leaders in the Western Balkans. And as you know, in geopolitics there is no vacuum. If European Union and NATO are not there, Russia is there with their doctrine of destruction and with their subtle mechanisms of hybrid warfare in the Western Balkans. So today we have the Western Balkans that is devastated in terms of values. Today, primarily due to the fact that values are devastated, Western Balkans is in poorer position towards the European Union than in 2003. And this is not my personal impression. I could hear President of Serbia or Prime Minister of Macedonia, who in very important places in European Union said something about that. It was in the meetings organized by the High Representative Mr. Borrell. I could hear them say there that in those two countries, without any doubt, there is lesser support to membership to the European Union than 7 or 8 or 10 years ago. So I want to tell you that in the end, we can blame both sides, of course, but I think that there is a failure or mistake in the enlargement policy of the European Union that can't be forgiven. I mean, enlargement policy was the most successful policy of the European Union, and then the European Union just stopped and started hesitating, particularly when it comes to the Western Balkans. And Western Balkans is a specific region. It's unstable. It's lagging behind. People are not born in the Western Balkans with inherent European values. No, you have to encourage them very much to adopt European system of values. So there is no result if European Union doesn't encourage them. And there was no encouragement from the European Union. And in the meantime, some others infiltrated with anti-European goals.
Do you think your country will ever join the European Union? Or is it now turning into a kind of lost cause?
I think that my country will join the European Union, and I do not agree with the pessimism of people who say that it will happen in 2014. I was at the head of the government for 7 times in Montenegro, and I was for 2 times president of Montenegro, and I can tell you precisely, I think that for the country like Montenegro, it doesn't take more than 3 years to finish the negotiation process. I was at the head of the government which opened all chapters with the European Union. So I'm not telling you any empty roles. I managed the team that opened negotiation chapters, and I know how much work there is so that we can say we are ready on the internal level. So now the key question is whether the European Union is indeed willing to continue negotiation process. If we are to judge on the basis of the reflex that it showed after the aggression against Ukraine, then it's encouraging. But for now, we have only a reflex, nothing else. Let us be realistic. A number of countries got a candidate status. As you know, from the point of view of accession to the European Union, it is just the beginning of the beginning. It's not even a beginning. After that, you get the conditions to start the negotiations. And then when you meet those requirements, then the negotiation process is long. I'm talking to you from the country which even today, although we are lagging behind for 5 or 6 years, we are still leaders in the negotiation process. And it wouldn't take us longer than 3 years. But we just have to revive the process, and the European Union has to recognize the accession of the countries of the Western Balkans as their own interest, not only as our interest, but as their interest as well.
Isn't the problem, though, that Montenegro is always going to be 2 or 3 years away from joining? I mean, I remember hearing this argument 10 years ago, and you've always been seen as one of the more advanced countries, and it hasn't happened. And I just wonder, to play devil's advocate, at what point do you reach the point of no return? At what point is the Russian option a better option, or is the Chinese influence so great that joining the EU might not be the path forward for you?
Your question is very good, and this question brings us back to what I told you. This is possible, and whether it will happen, well, that depends on two partners, European Union and the countries of the Western Balkans. My country has no dilemma. My country wants to be a member of the European Union. 70% of citizens even today confirm that they want to be a part of the European Union. So reforms are lagging behind, and I'm completely open about that, but I'm telling you that it is very much possible to revive the energy in a very short period of time, because that was the energy that we used to join NATO and open negotiation chapters, and we can close them. But just we need to have on the other side the willingness to accept a new member and to encourage reform processes in the Balkans. It's really a good question that you asked about when the offer of the European Union will stop being more attractive than what Russia and China are offering. I mean, that's a very good question and realistic question. I can tell you that Russia used... I'm sorry, I can't hear him. The microphone is not working. I'm sorry.
To možemo nazvati razvojem baza njihovog hibridnog rata u regiji. Kada vam govorim o bazama, imam u vidu ogromnu koncentraciju njihovih medija u tim bazama. Ogromnu koncentraciju...
I'm sorry, I can't hear him at all.
Prije svega u sektoru energetike.
I just can't hear him.
Potpunu zloupotrebu vjerskih organizacija.
There is no sound. Oh, everything he does. Yes. And he keeps talking.
We have a little problem with the microphone. We just have to resolve that, and the translation, which hopefully can be resolved. Bear with us for 1 minute. Someone's coming to repair the microphone. Help is at hand, I'm told. Bear with us. Won't be too long. We've had a few technical glitches today,
but I can't hear anyone. I can't hear the other person. I mean, Matthew, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Now I can hear you. Now they fixed something.
So okay. Fixed it.
Yes, they fixed it.
Okay. Very good. Please continue.
So, I wanted to tell you that Russia developed its presence in the region in a very systematic way. It's a very strong media influence, very strong economic influence in the field of energy, and strong intelligence influence and security influence, and also abuse of religious organizations, and a huge amount of money, grey money, that is used to service all of that. You know, in the countries in the region where people are not born with European values as inherent part of their being, it's very attractive to accept such offers. So it's not easy to those who promote European values in the region, and the governments usually do that. It's not easy for them to deal with the resistance, and it's even more difficult if you don't have a consistent and very precise support from the European Union.
But given how long you were president, and keeping in mind that the Russians did try to assassinate you, I don't know if people remember this episode, it wasn't that long ago. I find it impressive that you survived the assassination and a brush with Donald Trump a few years ago at a NATO summit. But all kidding aside, why do you think you were not more successful in countering this Russian influence in Montenegro, which, as you say, remains very strong?
I told you that generally, in my opinion, the policy of the international community is wrong when it comes to Western Balkans. I was saying about something that was not a mistake, but bad intention of Russia. It's anti-European policy of Russia, which is being implemented with the support of nationalist policies in the Western Balkans. As we know, in every European country, in every European society, Russia encourages anti-European policies, and in the Western Balkans, as natural partners for Russian destruction, you have Balkan nationalisms. And that's clear to everyone. But we didn't mention the other part of the mistake. I think that the policy of the Western part of the international community, our Western partners, is not on the good course. So I told you in the first part about insufficient activity of the European Union, and now I would like to tell you where I can see the mistake, the error of the team of the European Union and the United States that is working on solving huge problems in the Western Balkans, starting with the problem of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. So I consider that their policy is not principled enough. I think it's unilateral. I think it's full of compromises. And in all of that, it is a policy that does not care much for the solution of the problems that are common to all people and to all societies in the Western Balkans. So the key question in the Western Balkans is stability. Without stability, you can't have democracy or institutional or economic development. The key threat to the stability of the Western Balkans are Balkan nationalisms. Balkan nationalisms, unlike other nationalisms, are aggressive, conquering, genocidal. I mean, they, in the end, lead to Srebrenica. And in Kosovo in 1999, they were to lead to the change of ethnic map, removing about 1 million Albanians from the Western Balkans. So flirting with Balkan nationalisms in any way, in any segment, due to or because of any cause, is wrong and devastating. And it seems to me that people who develop policy for the Western Balkans want at any cost to make a partnership with Serbia. And they need to get two concessions from Serbia. One, for Serbia to leave the lap of Russia, and they will confirm that by introducing sanctions against Russia or applying sanctions. And the second concession is that they give up on obstructing recognition of independence of Kosovo through their action, because they are working on this and people are withdrawing their recognitions. I understand both causes and both goals, and I support both of them. I think it would be so beneficial that Serbia is very firm on the European path. And as a leader of the country that recognized independence of Kosovo, I think that it's high time that Kosovo becomes a member of the United Nations. But I don't understand and don't support the concessions that they are giving to Serbia, so that Serbia makes these two concessions. And these concessions that are given to Serbia are related to the stability of the region. I mean, they let Serbia to lead the policy of not managing their own country, but managing the lives of Serbs in the region. So Serbia wants to restore the policy formulated by Milosevic in the 90s. It was the policy all Serbs in one country, or something that was defined in the mid-19th century as Greater Serbia. So today, Serbia has the same policy, and they jeopardize sovereignty of the neighboring countries, starting with the country that I, until recently, led.
Let me ask you a question about that. Let me just ask you a question about that, because you raised a good point. You're not the only one. There are many people who accuse Alexander Vučić of trying to create a greater Serbia in the region. What do you think is the bigger threat right now to the stability in your country and in the larger region? Is it Russia or is it Serbia? And your new government is obviously quite close to Vučić.
Well, I could tell you that from our experience, you don't know actually whose influence was worse. Until 3 years ago, Montenegro was qualified from the West as the anchor of stability and the country of good news from our region. But today, it is described as a cancer of the region. And it's been just 3 years. And I will tell you why this happened. Because around Montenegro, they created an atmosphere around Montenegro that there is an imperative to change structures in power in Montenegro. And that imperative was created equally by the East and by the West. And it's clear to me why Russia did it, because Russia has historic interests in the region. And it's clear why Serbia did it, because Serbia for a long time has an interest for Montenegro to be a part of the greater Serbia. But why our Western partners did that? Why did they put that as an absolute goal? Why was it so important to have the change for the sake of change? That's the question that they should answer. They are silent about it today. They say today that Montenegro is much worse than 3 years ago, but they don't have the need to explain or to say how much they actually contributed to that. You know, when Russia, 3 years ago, in order to change structures in power in Serbia and used Serbian Orthodox Church for that, then from the West, we could hear how they are very much concerned about jeopardize the religious rights of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro. And then a year after that, the European Parliament makes a statement that Serbian Orthodox Church is an instrument of the Russian imperial interest in the Balkans. And that's true. And that's the most dangerous tool of Serbian greater nationalism and Russian imperial interest in the Balkans. Do you think that today, after 3 years, 3 years later, and after they helped this interest to be met, do you think that somebody from the West said, oh my God, we made a mistake, maybe we could fix something, maybe we should restore that positive example of a country in the region like Montenegro was? They don't say that. You know, the privilege of the great big ones is to make mistakes, and they are allowed to be reckless to the detriment of the small ones. That's the problem in Montenegro, and I am afraid that this is spreading like a virus in the Western Balkans. We all know what Russia is doing and what the followers of Russia are doing in the Western Balkans, but they would be much less successful if it weren't for such a role of the Western policy.
I want to come back to that point, but I would like to remind the audience I'd enjoy a couple of questions from you, should you have any. We have microphones floating around the room. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask you, you've known Alexander Vučić, President Vučić, for a very long time. What does he say to you? What is his response to you when you tell him that you think that he is trying to craft a greater Serbia in the region, which presumably would include your country?
He says what he would say to you, that he's not doing that it's not his idea at all. But you have the deeds. He doesn't have to say that, and you have information that I get from people in high positions in diplomacy of our Western partners who tell me, we asked him, is it possible that you sent 15 million euro of grey money to ensure the victory in one elections, local elections? And he said, I didn't say send 15, I sent 12 million. It was local elections in one city in Montenegro. What can you conclude out of that? If from all addresses from the state of Serbia, you can hear that the census in another country, in Montenegro, is the issue of strategic interest for Serbia. What can you conclude from that? The only conclusion is that they want to turn Montenegro into a national state, the state of Serbian nation, and that they are doing it with the support of the Serbian Orthodox Church. And they are trying to rewrite the history, and they are trying to prove that Montenegro never had its own church, so that the Serbian Orthodox Church can have clear space to act and to make all people in Montenegro declare themselves as Serbs. That's something that some people don't see. They don't want to see that. In some places where they should see that. I really welcome that those addresses in the West understood that Putin is doing revision of history and that he is trying to establish the Russian world, ensuring that Russia now has the strength of the Soviet Union, and the Western world is now resisting that. But if my perception is good, and please don't underestimate my experience of 30 years, the West is waging war against the Russian world, but on the other side, they are flirting with the Serbian world, which is the replica of the Russian world in our region, and that's very inconsistent.
I would like to go to the audience. We have a question here in the second row from SAIS, I believe. If you could reintroduce yourself.
Sure, of course. Thank you very much. Edward Joseph, Johns Hopkins SAIS in the United States. Gospodin Đukanović, drago mi je da vas vidim opet. And let me acknowledge your historic achievements as leader of Montenegro, breaking with Milosevic, leading your country to independence and leading your country to NATO membership. No one should ever forget that. I just would invite you to be even more concrete, to take this opportunity to be even more concrete about your critique of the U.S. policy, to be specific and concrete about what the Biden administration should do. We see these developments in the north of Kosovo. So if you were meeting with President Biden, what would you concretely tell him that the United States should do, given the advantages and that President Vučić enjoys over Kosovo, that's not recognized? And also on this question of the Serbian Orthodox Church. You know, the United States has no experience with state churches by our history and our Constitution. We don't know how to deal with influence of state churches. Could you speak to your own experience dealing with that in Montenegro?
To the answer, because we're short on time. Try to keep the answer short, please, if you will. Thank you.
Dear Professor, thank you very much for very inspiring
Hvala vam na vrlo inspirativnom pitanju. Asocirali ste me na nešto što sam pročitao.
You just reminded me of something that I read. Somebody who knows Balkans very well said that Senator Biden would have many clever things to say to the President Biden. I had an opportunity 26 years ago to discuss with Senator Biden the situation in our region, and I have to say that he was the one who was extremely competent about this topic, one of the rare persons in the world. I understand that today they have much more urgent geopolitical priorities than the Western Balkans, and I understand that this might be the reason why there is no direct American policy in the Western Balkans, but what seems to me is that it does exist, but it is wrong. You asked me what I would give as advice. Don't make compromises with the Balkan nationalisms. If you think that the spirit or genie of Balkan nationalism can be let out of the bottle a little bit, you are wrong. You can't stop it. You can't control it. I'm telling you this as a person who was 30 years ago on the scene. I mean, Milosevic and other people thought that they could just play a little bit with the genie of nationalism, but when they let it out of the bottle, nobody could control him anymore. I don't know if Milosevic gave commands to do the genocide in Srebrenica, but I personally think that it was not needed, because the local the quotation marks patriots wanted to compete who would prove to be greater nationalists, and they didn't need commands to commit genocide. I mean, if you allow Serbia to be ruined, impudent in the region, try to control lives or manage lives of Serbs in other countries, that is actually playing with greater Serbian nationalism. And I don't know if Serbia will give them what they expect, whether Serbia will get out of Putin's lap and turn to Europe completely, and whether they will get a Serbian constructive attitude towards the recognition of Kosovo. But what they certainly are getting is the worsened regional relations.
Given that the genie of nationalism, as you call it, has arguably been out of the bottle for quite some time, yet there are tensions in your country, in Bosnia again, Kosovo obviously. Where do you see the most dangerous flashpoint in the region at the moment? what is the most dangerous situation? And do you think if we see something more frightening, say, in Kosovo, that could spread to other parts of the region?
All the things that I said just confirm that the events in Kosovo yesterday are only or come only as a reflection of insufficiently designed and insufficiently consistent policy of the international community in the region. We had incidents in Kosovo yesterday, but they did not come all of a sudden. I mean, they were not surprising. And these incidents confirm what I just said. Is there anybody here in this room who could have any dilemma whether elections organized in that manner will be useful to anyone? I mean, those were elections in 4 municipalities where Serbs who are dominant community boycotted. I mean, only a couple of % of Albanians who live in those municipalities participated in those elections. And some very, very relevant addresses in the West said those elections are okay and that those results will be recognized. I mean, when the Prime Minister of Kosovo started implementing the results of such elections, that in the meantime were verified by the international community, now he's criticized. And they neglect the authority of the state bodies. I mean, if they had elections and elections were recognized, what is more logical than to implement the results? But it was clear in the beginning that those elections would not benefit anyone, and the least the negotiation process between Belgrade and Pristina. And I just want to tell you, the problem between Belgrade and Pristina, the problem of Bosnia and Herzegovina, even more than the problem of Belgrade and Pristina, and the problem of a very long lagging behind it European integration in Northern Macedonia are equally difficult problems, because those are the open wounds of the Western Balkans, and those open wounds, just like frozen conflicts, are used by those who would like to destroy the European perspective of such societies. So, in the region, we all together, and European Union and NATO, we have to focus to close those open issues. Europe and NATO have to say something that they never say, and that is the following. Western Balkans is European region. That is the part of the Euro-Atlantic area. That's our primary responsibility. Stay away from the Western Balkans. European Union and NATO have never said so, because their hands were far away from the Western Balkans, and they shouldn't have been.
What I don't understand is why you nonetheless are so optimistic that you think that the accession will still happen, because you've painted a pretty dire picture here.
Because I think that Europe has to accept the fact that if it leaves the Western Balkans behind, or any other European region, and if it leaves it outside of the United Europe, it weakens its own geopolitical competitiveness. So we definitely are entering a new stage of geopolitics. We are faced with a new geopolitical architecture being constructed. You know, the Cold War era ended, and the era of a monopoly of one superpower in the world is finished as well, because that era led us to the situation where we are now discussing whether we will have nuclear war or not. Can we go deeper in, can it be worse? We as Europeans are primarily interested where Europe will be in the new geopolitical order, and it's absolutely clear that Europe, if it wants to be competitive, it has to be stable. If it wants to be stable, it has to be united. If it is not united, and if Western Balkans is left to Russia, then we have huge problems for stability of Europe. That's why I'm an optimist.
Your own political career ended quite suddenly, as we discussed at the outset, but you're still a fairly young man, if I may say so. Would you rule out going back into politics? You've also resigned the leadership of your party. Just briefly, please.
Kada danas pogledam političku...
When I look at the political scene, then I'm 100% sure that I exclude coming back. Because today's political scene, not only in my country and not only in my region, but generally, is not inspiring at all. I mean, it's obvious that the quality of politics in the entire world is very bad. And the political space, which was the space for smart people, for hardworking people, for responsible people, turned into the space where people who have nothing else to do in life compete on. I mean, today the political scene for me is not inspiring, not at all. But as I said, I hope it is not permanent. I hope that we do live in time of populism. It destroys all the values, including the political ones. But if we believe that it is permanent, then it's a disaster. And I don't believe in disasters. I believe that we will survive this bad stage. I believe that the political scene will stabilize and that smart people will go back to the political leaderships and that we will again have serious policy that will ensure prosperity on our planet.
Well, on that somewhat optimistic, somewhat pessimistic note, we're going to have to end it. I'd like to remind the audience that the next session will start immediately with my esteemed colleague Lily Beyer. Please join me in thanking President Jokanovic for his time and frankness in this discussion. Thank you.